Today, I want to share an insight with you that started out as a realization about virtual worlds in video games, but that has massive implications for what it means to be alive as a human being in the real world, especially in these increasingly strange modern times that we find ourselves in. I think this explains a lot about the alienation and loneliness and disconnection that we can often feel, especially in the kind of modern city apartment life. Along the way, we'll also discover the one kind of song you can't get on Spotify. And we'll finally connect it all to the most dystopian ad I've ever seen, the potential future of AI companions and commodified friendship, and what it all means if you'd like to be happy and at peace, even as the world gets crazier around you. So let's wind it all the way back. As I said, it started with this insight about video games and virtual worlds. Think about the kind of video game where you are in an open world. Usually this is a role-playing game or something where there's a big map and you can kind of wander around on that map. You can go wherever you want to go. You can climb the mountain you see in the distance, that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure the most famous example of this kind of thing is Skyrim, which is quite an old game, but it has been re-released in a million editions ever since. And I think pretty much everybody who's ever seen a game has probably seen Skyrim. When it comes to an open world like this, what makes a world like this feel vibrant and alive? I can tell you right away, it's definitely not graphics. It doesn't really matter that much if the world is super high resolution, photorealistic textures and whatnot, because people can get immersed in a game like Minecraft. And on the other hand, there are plenty of examples of worlds that are super high resolution and use ray tracing and all kinds of stuff to look photorealistic, but they also look kind of dead and sterile. In fact, this is a typical tech demo problem. Like, it looks beautiful, but also kind of dead. A factor that matters much more than that comes down to one question. Does it feel like this world exists without you, the player, in it? Does it feel like this is a world in which stuff is happening and people are following their lives and creatures are in the wild and whatever, and you happen to be dropped into that world? Or does it feel like the only thing that ever happens in this world is stuff that you make happen, right? It feels like as soon as you don't go around doing stuff, the world is kind of just frozen, waiting for your next action. An example of this would be you have some character standing by the side of the road. You can walk up to this character and interact with them, and they will start a dialogue and they'll give you a quest. They'll give you something to do. But the question is that character just standing there by the side of the road forever, day and night, for weeks and weeks and weeks of in-game time? They just stand there and do nothing until you appear. Then they give you that quest, and then that's it. Maybe that character disappears entirely, or maybe they just stay standing there forever. That doesn't feel like an alive world. Like, that character isn't the real character. They might as well be a signpost. They only exist for you, the player. And it's the same for encountering creatures in the landscape. If you feel like these creatures actually have a life of their own, they're pursuing their own goals, and you just happen to come across them, that makes the world feel vibrant and like a place you want to be in, much more than if you just feel, well, these characters have been placed here and they're just kind of frozen in a pose, waiting for me to show up. So that's an interesting thought about game design. But like I said, this isn't about video games. This is about being alive as a human being, especially as a human being living in our modern times. I believe that this insight about game design tells us something really important about human nature. And I'll sum it up like this. If you're in too much control and your world is too much about you, you suffer. We can also call this modern city apartment syndrome. Think of a super desirable, super high-end modern apartment. Very sleek, very clean, very expensive looking. And also the kinds of lifestyles, the kinds of lives that are often depicted in, let's say, car commercials, when they want to show how sophisticated and futuristic their car is. We usually see these very modern, very sterile and kind of lifeless looking living spaces. Clearly, this is something that at least some of us aspire to, and that the world tells us to aspire to. And it makes sense. We want to have control over our environment, and a clean, sleek environment says, this is mine, I'm in control. Unfortunately, being too much in control also leads to suffering. If you wake up in your living space every single day and nothing has changed, everything is frozen in place and nothing happens unless you go and make it happen, well, now you've created that sterile and lifeless feeling environment for yourself that when we encounter it in a video game, we go, nah, I don't really want to be here. This is a way in which our comfort seeking really backfires. I think we end up optimizing to the point where we are causing our own suffering. And it's also why introducing pets or even just plants to that same living space immediately makes things liven up. It adds a dynamic factor that has nothing to do with you. That plant has a life of its own. It's going to grow, and it's not always going to grow exactly the way you want. And maybe some of your plants die and some of them thrive, and it's not all going according to plan at all times. And that's a good thing. I think this is one of the reasons why it can feel so relaxing and grounding and pleasant to be in nature. I think there are two factors to this. The first is that when you're in nature, then there is a constant reminder, every day is a reminder that you are a part of this whole dynamic system, that this whole world has existed long before you came along and will exist long after you're gone. And yes, you get to participate. Yes, you are a part of it, but this is not about you. That's humbling, but it's also a relief. And there's a crucial difference between waking up to the sound of birdsong or waking up to the sound of your Spotify playlist. Because even if birdsong is what you specifically want and you can get birdsong and nature sounds on Spotify, that difference still persists. The Spotify playlist is there for you because you wanted it to and you're in control. The real birdsong is not there for you. It's not about you. You can't change the volume. You can't go back to repeat your favorite part or switch to a different playlist. It's just happening and you get to witness it or not. In nature, the sounds you're going to hear are not always what you want to hear in that moment. And that's actually a good thing because this is the second factor. When you introduce this kind of dynamism of real life, when you're confronted with the pet that's feeling sick today and the plant that's growing up the wall even though you didn't want it to, and the birds that are singing or not singing, regardless of what you want, it does sometimes create discomfort and inconvenience. This is why we prefer the highly optimized Spotify playlist. However, that discomfort and inconvenience is actually really important. We need some of that. We need the world to push against our boundaries here and there, because if nothing pushes against our boundaries, we lose touch of our center. You don't know where you are anymore because nothing touches you. I think this may explain quite a bit of the misery that ultimately comes from being in what looks like a position of ultimate comfort. Like if you imagine yourself just indulging nonstop for a long time, you just sit in your comfortable couch and you're watching your favorite shows or whatever. You're just consuming social media, right? You're consuming the perfectly curated feed and the temperature is always perfect thanks to the aircon and you're snacking on your favorite food and so on. Everything is perfect and comfortable and convenient. And yet, for some reason, these things that give us this short-term pleasure lead to nothing but misery in the long term. I'm sure you can imagine if I showed you this person sitting in the couch scrolling through the feed nonstop and I told you, yeah, they've been doing nothing but this for the last 2 weeks, you'd be like, oh, wow, that's a real problem. They must be absolutely horribly depressed, right? We somehow know that that's not a good thing, that doesn't feel good. And I think we've all experienced that at least to some degree. We're so used to consuming well-optimized product versions of everything that we've forgotten the value of the imperfect. And I know this is a cliche, but I think this is really something we need as human beings. Both of these things. We need the feeling that not everything is about me and I'm part of something greater. And we need to have our boundaries pushed against. We need inconvenience and discomfort. If you have a friend and they call you at 3 a.m. because they really need help and they don't have a place to stay the night, that is not a problem. That is not a bad moment in that friendship because you had to wake up in the middle of the night and that's not what you were planning and your Aura Ring or Whoop Band sleep score is going to be worse today. Rather, I would say that this is what friendship is about. This might be one of the highlights of your friendship. The fact that you can be there for someone when it's not convenient, when it's not easy, and when they're in crisis. What makes friendship and connection and community good is not what we can get from each other. It's not that, well, you're entertaining to be around, you make me laugh, you make me feel good. It's much more than that. It is the good and the bad moments. It's giving help and receiving help. It is the whole mess. That's what we really want and that's what we really need. Look, I've seen this pattern in others and I'm sure I've done this too, where we seem to fall into this almost commodification of friendship, where you go like, yeah, sure, I'm going to meet people if it's convenient for me at the time. Nowadays, it's more and more common that people seem to reserve the right to change their minds until the last minute, right? So even though we agreed to meet today at 7 o'clock, at 6:30, you get the message saying, I'm not feeling it today, right? So it's like, well, this isn't quite convenient for me in this moment, so I'm not going to do it. It's almost like we're treating people like we treat the algorithms, where you say, okay, play me this video, and the moment it gets slightly boring, it's just like, okay, play me the next video. And on that note, certainly dating apps have definitely made the attempt to tell us specifically, explicitly, that this is how human interaction works. It is just an app. It's just a feed of people, and you reject them in a split second if there's any little thing you dislike about them. Which brings me to the friend pendant and the possibly horrifying future of commodified friendship that we are facing. So there's this company called Friend that released an ad for their product, which is easily the most dystopian thing I've ever seen. The idea is you wear this little necklace thing, and it is your friend. And you can tap the button and tell it things, and it will message you answers. And clearly, the way they advertise this is not an AI assistant. This isn't meant to be productive or anything like that. This is literally a friend, someone to banter with, someone to tell your troubles to, and whatnot. This is not the first attempt at commodifying friendship using AI. We already have a thing called Replica. And there was this whole thing where someone's trying to make like AI girlfriends with the Pixar hot mom aesthetic or something. That'll sound really weird unless you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, this kind of thing is coming. The idea that, hey, friendship is kind of complicated and you feel lonely and alienated, and also dating, oof, how stressful, and you don't want to be alone. So here's AI. Here's your AI alternative, because that's way easier, way more convenient. You don't have to have the courage to go talk to someone, and it can be optimized for you. And I think the very thing that will be used to sell these things is actually the worst thing about them. What is presented as a feature is actually what makes them misery-inducing. These things are convenient and hyper-optimized for you. They're meant to take away the friction and the discomfort. So you can have this thing that can act as your friend whenever you want them to. It comes with none of the inconvenience and downsides of a real friend, and it only exists for you. I want to finish this off by reading a tweet by the Vivid Void account in response to this friend ad. It starts as an AI friend to share jokes with, and ends as an LLM trained on your ex-wife who left you, or your deceased father, or the best friend who cancer took too soon. People you are not strong enough to choose to grieve. You never release your attachment to them, so you never come apart for a black, fractured year and slowly rebuild yourself, figuring out who you are in their absence. Your perfectly curated thicket of digital fantasies and relationships is just good enough to withdraw into day after day, year after year. So your body swims in a sea of unexpressed mourning, and soon your mind, acutely aware that it has lost something but unable to remember what, sinks so deeply into its own murk that you don't see your life closing down around you, reduced to its barest, saddest functions, bereft of spontaneity and delight and the fresh wounds of love. Because you could not face death, you will no longer be able to face life. It is far better to embrace loneliness, to develop your capacities for solitude, and try to find satisfaction in whatever meager connections are available to us in this sad, bizarre age. The alternative is a quandary that has haunted addicts and the mentally ill since before memory. A cloud of denial and sorrow so thick that your life remains tragically unlived up until the day it comes to an unforeseen and unceremonious end. I think this is very well put, and it does describe the kind of worst case outcome that I do think some people are going to experience. Some people are going to go into these real depths of suffering based on trying to grasp for, trying to solve their loneliness problem with some app, trying to turn the AI into your friend. I think it's going to lead to really, really tragic suffering. However, overall, my outlook on this isn't actually that bleak. I think that some people will go down the commodify everything route, and I feel sorry for them for all the suffering they're going to experience. But I also think that more and more people will be looking at this and waking up to the fact that, hold on, something's missing. And actually, instead of buying a product that pretends to be my friend, I do need friendship and I do need community in my life. And I'm super optimistic about this because as someone who was a total loner when I was younger and I had to kind of learn how to relate to people, how to socialize, how to make friends from scratch, and as an adult, I know how possible this actually is and how easy it is to learn to really love other people deeply and form deep and meaningful connections with them. To learn how to appreciate how amazing people are. In the depths of loneliness, it can be really hard to imagine. It can be really hard to imagine. It feels like, oh my God, how am I ever going to not be as alone as I am? But the solution is actually much, much closer than you think. And I see this over and over again. Like, people are really hungry for real connection. People are hungry for the real thing, especially once you get a taste of it. So yeah, I want to say, I think this is much more available to most people than we realize. And what I'm hoping is that there will be a surge of the alternative where the message is basically, hey, don't do that. Don't buy friendship as a product. Instead, learn how to create real connection and community in your life, and you'll be so much richer for it. This is something I've been exploring in my own life. I've made some incredible discoveries here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more about that with you soon. For now, that is all. I hope you found this insightful and interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, whether it's about the intricacies of game design or the whole thing about alienation and loneliness and too much control. Go ahead and leave a comment below. Also, if you enjoy the kind of content I make, one of the ways you can pay it forward is just to interact with my content. Leave a like, subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment. That just helps push the message out to more people, and I really, really appreciate it. I also super appreciate the comments and interactions and questions, so please keep those coming. That's all for now. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.